welcome to today's episode of Wake the Future. So today we are going to be talking about what we call AI economics for dummies. Now, this is something that Jared has been talking about for a while, and in our time, just the two of us, I have asked him so many questions about his thinking around it, and this is one of his new speaking modules. He has a lot of thoughts. So we're just going to take the opportunity today to really dig into the kind of economic side of AI, how it's being used as a utility, all of the things that Jared is talking about, but we're going to strip down the layers and kind of get to the heart of what is going on.
We're going to keep this very simple today. You know, there's so much we could dive into here, but I think we want to keep this video pretty brief and hit the top notes. I've been starting to go out there a little bit, both in my videos and then in some of the things I'm pitching, with two fundamental aspects of this. And when we talk about AI economics for dummies, I'm not trying to talk down to anyone. Basically, I'm not an economist. Let me say that first, and neither one of us is. And so I'm not coming at this from the perspective of an economist, nor am I trying to say that I know more about this than anybody else. It's a riff on that old line of, books and videos that was like blah, blah, blah for dummies. I'm looking at this whole ecosystem of artificial intelligence, and I'm thinking about this, and I'm like, there are some things that are very obvious to me. And I'm wondering why they're not obvious to other people. And then part of my thinking was that they might be, but people are either being told the wrong things or they're kind of willfully ignorant about certain things because they'd rather not think about them in those terms. So AI economics for dummies is really just an encapsulation of something which I think over time will build out into more specifics. But right now it's just two areas that I really like to cover. And one is about the ROI, the investment that has gone into and will continue to go into AI. And then the second part of this, as you already mentioned, is how AI is effectively going to be treated and distributed like a utility.
Why don't you touch on how you're seeing the ROI, so this return on investment, play out and kind of get to what it means and what you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, anyone who studies what's going on with AI, beyond just using it as a tool, knows that there is a significant amount of money getting invested into the AI space. And that's been the case for a while. So we'll throw out some figures here to get this started, because I think that helps anchor this. Between 2013 and 2024, okay, so about an 11-year period of time. And granted, AI, as we know it today, was still very rudimentary for most of that period, but about 1.3 trillion US dollars corporately invested in the development of AI that we know of. Now, that's a lot of money, okay, but that's over an 11-year period. The projection for 2026 is that spend on AI, global spend on AI, is going to be around 2.5 trillion US dollars this year alone. That is a staggering sum. So we know how important AI is. We know how important people think it's going to be. But let's put $2.5 trillion into context here, okay? $2.5 trillion with a T is greater than the GDP of every country on earth other than 7. And two of those countries, China and the US, that figure equals about 12% of China's current GDP and about 8% of the US's current GDP. And we know that figure is going to keep increasing. So that's what it is in 2026. What's it going to look like in 2028, 2029, 2030? We're talking about staggering sums of money being invested in this space. And my basic argument here is, like with anything else that's out there in the world, most of that money is not being invested altruistically. It's not being invested philanthropically. The investment is coming from a lot of different sources. Like with anything else, people want an ROI. They want a return on their investment.
But don't you also think that some of these investment dollars, it's kind of like the equivalent of data centers? It's the numbers are so opaque. There's no transparency.
That's right.
And a lot of those figures are spouted out by the companies that are making those investments. So it's like you're either seeing the numbers completely inflated, or there's no direct tie through. So then I juxtapose that against the stat that 93% of enterprise AI, whether it's pilots, strategies, whatever it is that they're implementing, fail. And yes, you can say it's because of no long-term vision, but then it's also is this basically the flatlining of the promise of AI? Does it live up to a lot of its hype, or is money just being thrown at it? That's not the end game, is any sort of direct return on investment.
I mean, I would actually disagree with that. I mean, I think that with anything else, when you're investing that kind of money, you need to justify a return on that. So let's put it this way. If a company, and companies have no incentive to inflate what they're spending on this, because here's the deal. If one of the big tech companies says that they're spending, let's say, $10 billion, whatever it might be, on artificial intelligence, they have no incentive to inflate that figure because they're going to be asked to justify justify those expenditures. They're going to be asked to produce results. So when we look at the bottom line, where are we seeing the yields on that, both this year, in the next 2 years, in the next 3 years, in the next 10 years? So yes, and individual investors are not doing this philanthropically. They want to see a return on that money. So the fact of the matter is, when we think about that staggering a sum, we have to understand that that's comprised of investments in R&D, it's data centers and data center infrastructure, which is massively expensive. And we know the politics around data centers and plopping them into different areas is creating all kinds of complexity. It's water and it's energy. This technology is the most water and energy intensive technology on Earth that we've ever seen. So those resources, how resource intensive, we're not even talking about the eco considerations here. We're just talking about how costly it is. The bottom line here is that when we talk about recouping $2.5 trillion in annual investment in this technology, and that is going up. Forget all of that. Even a sizable chunk of that will never be recoupable on the back of consumers like me and you. The idea that they can have B2C models where we are going to be using LLMs, and either we're going to be paying for them, or there's going to be robust advertising models, and those are going to exist, don't get me wrong, that are going to cover most of those costs. It's fantasy. There's no way that money can be recouped on the backs of consumers. So it comes through two other sources. The only way that most of that money can ever be recouped in a realistic sense is through government, the public sector, and through big enterprise. At the government level, AI supremacy increasingly is being viewed as global supremacy. So countries that control the future of AI are considered to have a political, a strategic, and a military advantage. Okay, so the US and China are obviously at the forefront of this, but a lot of other countries are involved as well. Let's separate that out for a second. Then there's big enterprise. Big enterprise, theoretically, and when I say big enterprise, that starts with the big tech companies and trickles down to companies that have large enough budgets that they can make massive expenditures on this technology. In the near term, what that equals is this idea that there's a productivity tool that's going to be deployed for all employees of companies. It's going to make them massively more productive. And that's what a lot of people are buying and selling right now. That's the idea that's in the marketplace. And a lot of people, including us, and most people we know who work in the knowledge economy, are already figuring out how to use these tools to their advantage. That's where we are today. The only way big enterprise is ever going to be able to recoup these investments longer term is by replacing at least part of their human headcount and automating it. That's the only way, because you have to get that line item off the books. People cost a lot of money. So to recoup this kind of investment, a lot of people are going to end up being directed somewhere else, or they're going to be removed entirely. That's not doomsday. I say this is like economics 101. This is just common sense.
I forgot we were filming for a second. I feel like I'm in the audience of a keynote and I need to be taking notes. This is great.
I mean, I'm sorry. I have a lot to say about this, and I feel like more people need to hear this and wake up to this.
This is why we're doing this episode
That's why we're
today.
Wake the future. People need to wake up.
We've had this conversation so many times in our kitchen where I've been picking Jared's brain. I'm like, tell me more about how you see this playing out. Again, because so much of my focus is on the human side of it. So here's a thing that I've picked your brain about this several times, and I've asked you to almost talk to me about this aspect of AI as if you were like teaching a kindergarten classroom. Because I've had some trouble getting my head around this concept of AI as a utility. So can you share your thoughts on that, both for me and anybody else listening?
I love the way you intro that. Now listen, I'm no smarter than a lot of people are about this. I just tend to view it again with common sense. So everything that I think of now, I think of through the lens of the Gestalt, the mission of Wake the Future.
You had me at Gestalt.
I know, I always have you at Gestalt. That's why I threw it out there. So it's the whole idea of how do we wake people up to what's right in front of them and use common sense. So when we think about this, Sam Altman very recently was on a stage. And Sam Altman, most of you know who that is, founder and head of OpenAI, debatably the most influential AI figure on the planet. And if he's not the most influential AI figure, he's in the top 3 or 5. So he was on a stage, and he said that in the very near future, intelligence, in the form of artificial intelligence effectively, was going to be metered out and distributed like a utility, like electricity, for example. And some people heard that, and they thought to themselves, is he saying the quiet part out loud? Like, is this kind of the reality? And was he not supposed to say this? But of course, he's in a position, he can say whatever he wants. Or some people thought it was hyperbole. Like, he's exaggerating. It's never going to get quite to that point. I'm a believer that you take what he said there, face value. Their interest is bringing investment capital into the space and hyping it up. So when you are honest and you're talking about the fact that this eventually will be metered like a utility, I think that is raw, it is real, and it's exactly where we're going here. So, I don't want to get too much into the lexicon right now. There's trendy lexicon. Everyone talks about tokens. and token maxing and now token minting. And I really hate getting on that highway. Tokens.
And here I am sitting here and like picturing those little tokens that you use at the arcade. And I'm like,
yes, they are kind of like arcade tokens in a way. I mean, that's the thing. I'm not an expert.
The kind where like then your kid gets like super cracked out because they've used way too many of them.
Yeah, or the old tokens to get on the subway. I mean, so here's the thing, like, I'm not an expert on this either. Not those, but similar. So again, I'm not an expert on this, and but the bottom line is each token of artificial intelligence, I think, is equivalent to like a certain amount of characters that are input into an LLM. So if you're using
a large language model,
if you're using ChatGPT, Claude, or any other model out there, a certain amount of characters used in an input or a prompt basically equates to a token. So it's an input metric. And I see a lot of talk now in my circles and on LinkedIn among engineers and people who are smart about this. They're talking all about tokens and token utilization. And the whole idea is that the model is already changing. So like people like us as individuals, and a lot of people watching this video, they either have a free subscription or they pay a small amount a month to access a better level of something like Claude or ChatGPT so that you can use it for your own personal purposes. But in companies where there is a massive volume of this intelligence being used, it was determined very quickly and wisely that you can't just charge a flat fee to a company to use as much intelligence as it wants to use because it's so resource intensive and it's not a model that ever will succeed. So they determine that it's going to be on a usage-based model. So instead of paying a flat fee and using it as much as you want in a given month or year, you pay for access to a certain amount of intelligence through tokens. And when you exhaust those tokens, then you either are out of intelligence or you can buy more. So it's no different than buying tokens at an arcade. It's just a more sophisticated version of that. You know, when you run out of tokens at an arcade, you either leave the arcade or you go to the machine and buy more. Mm-hmm. So that's what's happening here. And when you think about most of the significant token usage right now, the application of this is being done with engineers, developers, who are figuring out how to use AI to create better AI or to create better applications at companies that are heavily invested in AI. AI is already being treated as a utility. Mm-hmm. You pay for usage, you don't pay a flat fee. In our house here, we don't negotiate a price where we're like, okay, we'll pay $200 a month and that covers all of our electricity costs. No, we pay by usage. That's how AI is going to be. Now, take this out of the...
That's why I yell at you when you don't turn the lights off.
You yell at me all the time. Let's look at this. Let's bring this forward in two realms, the individual realm and the enterprise realm. So in the enterprise realm, we talk about AI being a utility, and that the cost of that utility is going to keep increasing as the money invested in AI and the cost of distributing AI goes up. It's not going to be an unlimited resource. You think about data center costs, you think about energy costs, you think about water costs. So it's going to cost more and more for companies to spend for these tokens, okay? So what ends up happening ultimately is in the near term, again, it's probably going to be used as a massive productivity enhancing tool, or at least that's what they're saying, for the people working at these companies. But over the course of time, people are going to get displaced from these companies, all right? So
and as we've talked about in so many of our Wake the Future episodes, that is the ultimate paradox.
Yes.
It's the productivity paradox. So, you know, a question for you too is like, how do you see some of this playing out longer term from a productivity perspective? Because, right, that was the promise of AI. The promise of AI was that it would free people up.
Yeah.
And if they were able to token max, they would be able to boost their productivity and then move on to do other things. But now I kind of go back to like, teach us like we're in the classroom. Like AI has almost become like the kindergartner, like, and the people are the kindergarten teacher. Like they have to supervise the AI. So it's like, do you think a lot of these tokens are going to be spent on the supervision and the checking and the oversight and the judgment and all of these things that are being added back to the pot that are equally, if not even more time intensive?
Well, actually, no, they're not. The tokens are not going to be spent on that at all. That's going to be human time on the back end.
Yes, that is human time.
Human time on the back end is going to be in verification of a lot of the aspects of what's produced. So that's why this whole relationship that's forming, and there are people on all sides of this. I see the debate in real time when I go on LinkedIn and I look at these discussions. People in the engineering space who are arguing for token maxing and those who are arguing for the opposite and everything in between, because the utilization of the intelligence right now still has unknown correlates with the human time and the human effort put in. How do you justify? So look, we've been arguing for decades now. I mean, we've been at this together for almost 2 decades. And we've been talking about how this is one of the fascinating things to me about this, how the metrics have been so outdated and so industrial about input. Like we judge people because it's easier to measure on input. You have your butt in a seat for 8 hours a day. 5 days a week. You either literally or metaphorically clock in and clock out. It's easy to track your activity. That's how people have been measured, based on input. It's sometimes harder to base metrics on output. Now we're going too far to the other extreme, where it's all about how much stuff can you churn out. It's about quantity of churn. And that quantity of churn has X% AI utilization and Y% human utilization. And depending on how aggressively you use the tokens allotted to you, that changes that recipe. The question is, are we in a place yet, and will we be in the near future, where as enterprises we can actively and correctly evaluate not just the quantity of churn in the output, but the quality of that output, and then reverse engineer how much of that output was created by AI versus humans?
That's why I've said the spectrum, again, like we were talking about the shift from input to output 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Now the conversation is from output to outcomes.
It's yes.
And the outcomes then have to be human-centric. They have to be around A plus I. They have to be around facets of agency and identity. It's not just around productivity and efficiency anymore.
Right.
And again, both of those in and of themselves have become paradoxes, because AI was supposed to come and solve for that. And now we're seeing almost like entropy created in the system.
Yeah, and I mean, again, I like that sometimes like we take turns doing this, and in this video, you're playing devil's advocate on a lot of these things, and that's necessary. It's too early, and I think it's case by case to determine whether or not we have a productivity paradox or not. I think in some cases it's making people extremely productive. We were talking to people just yesterday, friends of ours, about how productive they feel like they're becoming because they're using these tools. But for every example of that, you find a counterexample of people who are spending more time working because they're spending more time checking and verifying the outputs of what's...
And it's not a zero-sum game.
It's not a zero-sum game, but we've moved from input-based metrics to output-based metrics, and now we have to move from output-based metrics, which have all of a sudden become in vogue, and it's quantity of output using AI, to outcome-based metrics, and that is not a perfect science, and that's where we have to go.
And I would argue, of course, because this is me, the next iteration of that is going to be in non-metric metrics.
No.
So it's like, we love metrics.
Ooh,
we want...
non-metric metrics.
But like, we want things that are quantifiable. We want things that are tangible.
Yeah.
And large percentages of the knowledge economies, they cling to data, right? They need data. They need it to substantiate.
Oh, data's like a binky. It's like a pacifier.
Yeah. But when everything becomes intangible, as we move into, all of the things that I love talking about, wisdom-based work, judgment, curiosity, imagination, all of these things that cannot be measured, we might be at one of the last periods of time where we actually have metrics and metrics that matter.
That's interesting. I mean, that's a very interesting perspective, and I can see where you're going with that. And it'll be interesting to revisit this in a few years and see if that's kind of directionally where we're going. But I do want to I want to bring this back to the practical again, which is that in this world where we have tokens, and in this world where we have utilization of AI treated like a utility, okay, we have to look at where this is going, where the outcomes are going to go. In the enterprise world, okay, again, they are going to pay exorbitant sums for access to intelligence, enterprises are. And when they do that in the near term, it probably is going to be a through line, whether it is justified by the data and the outcomes or not. It's going to be justified to the public. There's a through line between greater productivity of our people and the utilization of AI, okay? Over the course of time, you have to assume that a lot of these people are going to lose their jobs, or they're going to be displaced and they're going to have to be moved somewhere else. And we call this musical chairs. That's one of the first episodes we did. One of the areas it's going to be most heavily hit, and I do not care where the data is today on this. We're talking about where the puck is going. Ironically, are going to be coders. It's going to be engineers and developers. They're going to be hit very heavily by this technology they are creating. And in the next 5 or 10 years, a significant percentage of them are going to be redeployed doing something else, or going to have to figure it out. Now, the argument is that AI is going to be such a useful tool, and this is the utopian argument, that we're going to be in a world of solopreneurs. Solopreneurs is basically the fancy word for people who start companies of one. They might be displaced from their jobs or something else might happen, but there's going to be this ecosystem that allows individuals like you and me, but en masse, to start their own businesses using AI tools to be more productive and yield more.
The whole idea, right, is that like AI would then come in and be several functional areas at once. That like they could deploy AI to be their legal department, their marketing department, their accounting team.
AI would be effectively a democratizer for entrepreneurs. It would allow everyone to become an effective entrepreneur. There are fundamental problems with that, okay? There are 3 fundamental assumptions that are very wrong with that. So when you hear that, my task for all of you is to question things. Use common sense. Number 1, it presupposes that most people have marketable skills or ideas. They do not. That's not a knock on people. It's just most people are not built to be entrepreneurs. So the second part of that is that it presupposes that most people can sell effectively. They cannot. And these are things that are not necessarily directly outsourceable right now to artificial intelligence. And number three is the fundamental one. And that presupposes that all of these solopreneurs are going to have unfettered, unlimited access to as much intelligence as they want. And they won't, because it will be metered like a utility. And the average person will only be able to afford a little bit or no intelligence when the cost of this gets so prohibitive. So I always say that the freemium models that we enjoy today, where people like us are sitting here either paying nothing or paying very little for these models, some of that will be buffered over time by advertising and aggressive, micro-targeted advertising. Don't get me wrong. But this is not social media. AI is not social media. It is a much more advanced technology. It's revolutionary. It's not just a new form of distribution. It's a new form of doing everything. And it's going to cost many multiples more than social media ever did for the companies that distribute it. So as a result of that, the costs are going to be significantly higher, and advertising is not going to cover it. I talked about this just a few minutes ago and when talking about ROI. So the bottom line here is that over the course of time, this is going to be a massive source of economic inequality. You're going to have people who can access as much intelligence as they want or need. And you're going to have people who can barely access any. And I always say that.
And maybe this ultimately is a clarion call for people to actually develop their own thinking muscle.
Well, that's the thing. And this ties into what we're talking about, which is no matter how much AI you do or do not use in the future, and it is such a useful tool. I mean, we use it all the time right now. You have to continue to stay sharp as a human being. You have to continue to sharpen those mental muscles. I say today that the freemium models that exist, that we use, that millions of people, actually now you could argue billions on this planet have used at least somewhat, are a combination of a beta test. They are a massive data gathering exercise. Everything that we input into these models is used to train these models. It's also used to prove that they work. And in many ways, it's a Trojan horse. It's a way to bring this technology to all of us and then eventually say, okay, now you're going to have to pay more for it to continue accessing it. And you've developed a relationship now in many cases with this LLM for 1 year, 3 years, 5 years. It knows everything about you. It's basically your personal assistant. What if we pull the rug out from under you? So that's where the future is going.
Will that then lend itself to more open source models and like the creation of other sorts of kind of artificial intelligences? And so that's its own whole kind of Pandora's box of questions that people don't have access to.
It is. And look, invariably, I know the people that we are connected to, and I know that there's going to be a subset of people who see this and they're going to immediately push back because they represent the AI space or the developer space, and they're going to be like, some of this is misdirected. I'm just saying this now. I opened with this and I'm going to close with this. To me, everything happening right now, as complex as it is, can be viewed through a lens of common sense. And people just need to wake up because the reality is right in front of them. I'm not saying anything here that is groundbreaking or earth-shattering. It just happens to be counter-narrative to some of what's out there because most people either can't see or don't want to see what's right in front of them. This is reality. It's economics 101 to someone like me, who is a dummy when it comes to economics. I'm not an economist. I took a few economics courses in college and smoke came out of my ears. But I look at the ROI equation when it comes to artificial intelligence, and I look at the future of it as a utility, and I see exactly where this is going.
So thank you for attending Jared's mini TED Talk over here. I feel like I've learned a lot. So do you have anything else to add before we close this out?
I don't. I just hope that this has been useful for people.
So remember, this is all about common sense for uncommon times. With that in mind, we launched our website, so definitely make sure to check it out, wakethefuture.com. There are a lot of resources on there. Make sure to sign up for our newsletter. You'll get your free download of the Wake Up Starter Kit, which in our estimation is like a really fun exercise. There's a quiz in there, and it's all about turning these conversations into things that are actionable, tangible, that you can take home and do on your own. Do it with a friend, do it with your family. So thank you for joining today's episode. Hope you learned something from the professor over here, and make sure to like, follow, and subscribe for more. We'll see you next week.